The heart monitor screamed before Ethan Caldwell understood why his wife was standing so close to his daughter's bed. He had returned to the hospital early, cutting short a call that no longer mattered, carrying a small brown teddy bear under his arm because Lena never slept without it. The hallway outside the pediatric wing was dim, washed in soft night light, the kind meant to keep fear away. Everything looked calm. Everything sounded calm, until it wasn't. The sound came suddenly, sharp and wrong, slicing through the quiet like a blade. A rising alarm, too fast, too urgent, a sound that did not belong to a sleeping child. Ethan broke into a run. The door to room 214 was half open. He pushed it wider, and time, for just a second, forgot how to move. Vanessa Caldwell was standing beside the bed, not sitting, not leaning, standing. Her hands were on the clear oxygen mask that covered Lena's face, but it was not sealed. It was being pulled away, just enough, carefully, deliberately. Lena's chest rose unevenly. Her small fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered open in panic. The teddy bear slipped from Ethan's hand and hit the floor. Vanessa looked up. Her face did not show surprise. That was when Ethan knew this was not an accident. Ethan did not remember crossing the room, only that suddenly he was there, shouting his daughter's name, his voice breaking through the alarm and the frozen air. Vanessa's hands dropped. The oxygen mask fell back into place. Lena gasped, her body shuddering as breath returned in jagged pieces. Nurses rushed in. Someone pushed Ethan back gently but firmly. Another voice called for security. The alarm was silenced, replaced by quick footsteps and clipped instructions. Vanessa stepped away from the bed, her hands raised slightly, as if she had been startled, as if she were the victim of a misunderstanding. She began to speak, but Ethan did not hear her. He was watching Lena. Her eyes found him, wide, terrified, and then, slowly, relief spread across her face, as if she were afraid to believe he was real. Ethan turned to the nearest nurse and spoke with a calm that frightened even himself. "She tried to kill my daughter." The words did not shake. They landed heavily, filling the room with a truth that could not be gathered back up. Security escorted Vanessa out. She protested softly at first, then louder, her voice sharpening as the hallway swallowed her. Ethan did not follow. He stayed by the bed, holding Lena's hand, feeling the fragile rhythm of her pulse under his fingers. Minutes later, when the room had quieted again, when the machines had settled into steady beeps, Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed and tried to understand how the world he thought he knew had collapsed in less than a breath. Lena did not let go of his hand. She held it with both of hers, as if afraid he might disappear if she loosened her grip. Her fingers were cold. Her skin felt thinner than it should have. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words barely reached him. Ethan leaned forward. "You don't have to say anything," he told her. "You just need to rest." But Lena shook her head slowly, her curls brushing the pillow. Her eyes filled, not with pain, but with something heavier. "I didn't tell," she said. "I didn't tell you." Ethan's chest tightened. "Tell me what?" She swallowed. Her gaze flicked to the door, then back to him. "I thought you wouldn't believe me. She said you wouldn't." The room seemed to shrink. Lena spoke in fragments, in pauses filled with fear. She talked about doors locked too long, about being sent to bed without dinner when she cried too much, about arms grabbed too tightly, about words whispered low and sharp when Ethan was away on trips that promised security but delivered silence. She said if I talked, Lena continued, her voice trembling, you would send me back, that I wasn't really yours. Ethan closed his eyes. He had adopted Lena 9 months earlier. She had arrived small and cautious, clutching the teddy bear she now slept with every night. He had promised her safety. He had promised her permanence. And somewhere between meetings and flights and a marriage he thought was stable, he had missed the truth. A soft knock came at the door. A senior nurse stepped inside, her gray hair pulled back neatly, her movements unhurried. Her badge read Margaret Hale. She did not rush. She did not intrude. She waited until Ethan looked at her. "She's stable," Margaret said quietly. "She'll be okay tonight." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Margaret hesitated, then stepped closer. Her eyes moved to Lena's arms, to faint marks that had begun to fade but never fully vanished. "I've been doing this a long time," she said gently. "Children don't learn that kind of fear in one night." The words were not an accusation. They were an offering. Ethan felt something break open inside him. Hours later, as dawn began to pale the windows, Ethan sat alone in the hallway while Lena slept under careful watch. He stared at his phone, at messages he had ignored, at flights he had taken, at dinners missed, and moments postponed. He understood now that evil rarely announced itself loudly. Sometimes it waited patiently, dressed as perfection, hiding behind routines and smiles, behind closed doors. And sometimes it was stopped only because someone came home early. In the quiet of the hospital morning, Ethan made a promise that did not need to be spoken aloud. He would listen. He would stay. And he would never again assume that silence meant safety. The morning light crept into the room without asking permission, thin and pale, settling softly on the edges of the bed where Lena slept. Machines hummed at a steady, almost comforting rhythm now, as if they were trying to make amends for the noise they had made the night before. Ethan had not moved much. He sat in the same chair, his jacket folded over the back, his phone untouched in his pocket. Every few minutes he leaned forward just to make sure Lena was still breathing evenly, just to reassure himself that the night had not been a terrible misunderstanding his mind had invented. When Lena finally opened her eyes, she did not cry. She looked at him first, as if checking whether he was still there. "You came back," she said quietly. "I'm here," Ethan replied at once. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, accepting the words, but not fully believing them yet. Belief Ethan was beginning to understand had to be earned slowly. A doctor came in briefly. Gentle words were exchanged. Everything sounded careful and controlled. After that, the room was quiet again, and the quiet invited the things Lena had been holding inside for far too long. She spoke slowly, stopping often, as if each sentence had weight. "She didn't like when I asked questions," Lena said. "She said good kids don't ask why." Ethan listened without interrupting. His hands were clasped together so tightly that his fingers ached. "She said I was lucky," Lena continued. "Lucky you chose me. Lucky someone like me got to stay here. And that if I messed it up..." She trailed off, staring at the blanket. Ethan waited. "She said I'd go back," Lena finished. "Back where nobody came early." The words struck deeper than any accusation could have. Lena talked about small things, the kind adults often miss because they seem harmless. Meals skipped not as punishment, but as consequence. Doors closed a little longer than necessary. Touches that lingered just long enough to hurt, but not long enough to leave marks that stayed. "She said if I told you," Lena whispered, "you'd think I was lying, because she said you trusted her." Ethan felt the truth settle heavily in his chest. Vanessa had never needed to raise her voice. She had simply rewritten reality, one quiet sentence at a time, until Lena no longer trusted her own fear. That afternoon, Nurse Margaret Hale returned. She moved with the same unhurried calm, adjusting lines, checking readings, never rushing Lena. When she finished, she sat for a moment at the foot of the bed. "Do you know what children are very good at?" Margaret asked softly. Lena shook her head. "They're very good at surviving," Margaret said, "even when they shouldn't have to." Her eyes met Ethan's, and in that look, he understood that she had seen this before. Not this child, not this family, but this pattern. The quiet endurance, the careful silence. After Margaret left, Ethan stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall. For the first time since the night before, his composure cracked. He replayed memories with brutal clarity. Times Lena had flinched when he raised his voice on a phone call. The way she always asked permission to eat. How she watched Vanessa's face before speaking, as if seeking approval that never truly came. All the signs had been there, scattered like pieces of a puzzle he had never slowed down enough to assemble. A soft cough behind him broke his thoughts. Detective Claire Nolan stood a few steps away, her posture respectful, her tone calm. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but when you're ready, I'll need to ask a few questions." Ethan nodded. "I'll answer whatever you need." Claire did not pull out her notebook immediately. She spoke first, letting the words settle. "What happened last night was serious," she said. "But cases like this don't stand on one moment alone. They stand on patterns." Ethan felt a chill. Patterns, the word echoed. Inside the room, Lena listened as the adults spoke in hushed tones. She clutched Brownie to her chest, the teddy bear worn soft from years of being held too tightly. It had been with her before this house, before this hospital, before promises and threats blurred together. When Ethan returned, she looked up anxiously. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No," he said immediately. "You're safe." "Am I going to have to go somewhere else?" Her voice wavered. Ethan sat beside her and took her hands gently, careful not to startle her. "Lena," he said, choosing each word with care. "You are my daughter. Nothing that happens now will change that." She searched his face, looking for cracks, for doubt. "What if they ask me questions?" she asked. "Then you tell the truth," Ethan replied. "And if it's hard, I'll be right there." That evening, as the hospital lights dimmed again, Lena fell asleep holding Ethan's hand instead of Brownie. Her breathing was slow, steady, unafraid. Ethan watched her and understood something that no amount of money or control could ever guarantee. Safety was not built from walls or rules or appearances. It was built from presence. And presence, he realized, was the one thing he would never again give away. By the third day, the hospital no longer felt like a place of emergency. It felt like a place of waiting. Lena's color had returned slowly, as if her body were relearning what safety felt like. She spoke a little more now, asked for water without fear, laughed softly when Ethan pretended not to hear her tiny corrections about how Brownie preferred to sit on the pillow, not the chair. Ethan watched all of it with a mixture of relief and shame. Outside the room, Detective Claire Nolan worked quietly. She did not rush. She did not dramatize. She understood that truth often revealed itself best when no one tried to force it. Claire began where modern secrets usually lived: phones. Vanessa's phone had been taken the night she was escorted from the hospital. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Messages about schedules, Photos of dinners, notes about household errands, the carefully curated life of someone who wanted to appear in control. But phones remembered more than their owners intended. Search histories told a different story. Questions typed late at night, erased but not forgotten. Phrases about breathing and silence, about how oxygen levels could be altered without setting off alarms immediately, about how certain medical incidents were often labeled as sudden complications. There were searches about insurance, too. Life insurance policies connected to adopted children, payout timelines, legal language explaining who retained custody and therefore financial control if a marriage dissolved. Claire followed the digital trail patiently. She uncovered records showing Vanessa had tried 4 separate times to secure a policy worth $1.7 million on Lena. Each attempt had failed for a different reason. One lacked proper documentation. Another raised concerns because of recent medical visits. The timing was impossible to ignore. 8 months earlier, Vanessa had quietly lost her job. The official reason was restructuring. The internal reason was far darker. Embezzlement. Money diverted slowly, carefully, in amounts small enough to avoid attention at first. Debt followed. Credit cards, loans, quiet pressure. Claire laid the facts out on her desk and let them speak for themselves. This was not panic. This was preparation. Ethan was called into a private room later that afternoon. Claire sat across from him, her expression serious, but not unkind. "I need you to understand something," she said gently. "What we're looking at isn't a single act. It's a pattern that built over time." She told him about the searches, about the insurance attempts, about the job loss. Ethan felt as if the floor beneath him were shifting again, but this time he did not fall. "She planned this," he said quietly. Claire nodded. "That's what the evidence suggests." Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered Vanessa's calm expression the night in the hospital, the absence of fear, the certainty. That image now made terrible sense. While investigators worked, the hospital brought in a child therapist to speak with Lena. The sessions were gentle, unhurried, no direct questions at first, just drawings, stories, choices. Lena drew a house. It had thick walls, a small door, no windows. When asked who lived inside, Lena hesitated. "A girl," she said. "She stays quiet, so nothing bad happens." The therapist noted everything. Meanwhile, someone else was watching. Rosa Alvarez, the housekeeper, had been following the news quietly from her small apartment. She had recognized the names, the faces, the place. For years, she had cleaned that house. She had seen doors locked too tightly. She had heard crying stop too suddenly. She had noticed food untouched in the kitchen, plates returned untouched without explanation. She had written things down in a small notebook, never intending to use it, only afraid to forget. When she heard about the hospital incident, something in her finally broke. Rosa contacted the police. She arrived at the station trembling, clutching her bag like a shield. Claire listened without interrupting as Rosa spoke about dates, times, and moments she had never been able to erase from her mind. One entry stood out. A morning when Lena had been sick and Vanessa had insisted no doctor was needed. A morning when the house felt too quiet. Rosa's testimony filled in the spaces between digital proof and lived experience. By evening, the case had shifted. What had begun as a shocking moment in a hospital room had grown roots, stretching backward through months of control and fear. When Ethan returned to Lena's bedside that night, she sensed the heaviness in him. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. Ethan sat beside her and shook his head. No, he said. You told the truth. That's never wrong. She considered this carefully, then nodded, as if storing the idea somewhere safe. Outside, night settled over the city. In a police evidence room, files stacked quietly, waiting their turn to speak. Some truths, Ethan realized, did not need witnesses to scream them aloud. They waited patiently, and when they surfaced, they changed everything. When Ethan returned to the house for the first time after the hospital, it did not feel like home. The lights were still on timers. The furniture sat exactly where it had always been. Even the air smelled the same, faintly of polished wood and expensive candles. But something essential had left the place, something that could not be replaced by routine or wealth. Silence clung to every corner. Ethan walked through the rooms slowly, noticing things he had never truly seen before. The lock on the pantry door was heavier than necessary. The latch on Lena's bedroom window stuck slightly, as if it had been closed too often, too tightly. In the kitchen, a small step stool sat tucked away, unused, gathering dust. Rosa Alvarez had once mentioned that Lena struggled to reach the sink. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. At the dining table, he opened a drawer he had never bothered to open. Inside were folded papers, lists, notes written in a careful hand, times, dates, observations that meant nothing on their own, but together formed a quiet record of fear. Rosa's journal. He closed the drawer gently and stepped outside, unable to remain in the house any longer. Later that day, Rosa sat across from Detective Claire Nolan, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She spoke in a steady voice now, as if once the first words had escaped, the rest could no longer be held back. She talked about mornings when Lena's breakfast tray was taken away untouched, about instructions delivered with a smile that did not reach the eyes, about warnings whispered in Spanish that no one else would understand. She told me, Rosa said softly, that if I talked, my family would lose everything. Claire nodded. She did not rush Rosa. She let the pauses exist. Rosa handed over her journal. The dates matched, the patterns aligned. The fear had a timeline now. Vanessa was formally charged that evening. News spread quickly, but not kindly. Headlines were careful. Neighbors whispered. Speculation crept in where facts had not yet arrived. Ethan filed for divorce and obtained an emergency restraining order within days. The legal language felt strange in his mouth, but the meaning was clear. Vanessa would not come near Lena again. For the first time since coming home, Lena slept through the night. But safety, Ethan was learning, was not something that settled all at once. On the third night, his phone vibrated on the nightstand, a message from an unknown number. You are destroying your own family. Ethan stared at the words, his body stiffening. He did not respond. The next message came an hour later. She was never really yours. Then another. You don't know what you've done. 9 messages arrived before dawn, each one calm, each one certain. Someone was watching. Detective Nolan traced the number by mid-morning. The answer did not surprise her, but it chilled Ethan nonetheless. Elaine Porter, Vanessa's sister. A woman who had visited often, who had brought gifts, who had smiled at Lena while standing just close enough to make her uncomfortable. When police searched Elaine's apartment, they found photographs. Lena walking into school. Lena sitting on a bench. Lena holding Brownie in the hospital courtyard. There was a notebook as well. Inside, Elaine had written about loss, about betrayal, about how some people took things that did not belong to them. One sentence was underlined twice. She ruined everything. Elaine was arrested for stalking and harassment. But before she was taken in, she had already made her move. Child Protection Services received a report that afternoon. The accusation was simple and devastating: neglect, emotional harm, an unsafe environment. Ethan felt the ground drop out beneath him. For 5 days, time stretched thin. A caseworker, Rebecca Stone, arrived on the second day. She spoke calmly, professionally. She did not accuse. She did not reassure. She asked questions. She asked about Ethan's work hours, about travel, about who cared for Lena when he was gone. She asked Lena what home felt like now. Lena answered slowly. "It feels quiet," she said. "Not scary quiet, just quiet." Rebecca watched her carefully. "And before?" she asked. Lena hugged Brownie tighter. "Before, I felt like I had to be invisible." Rebecca nodded and wrote that down. She returned twice more. She reviewed medical reports. She spoke with the therapist. She read Rose's journal. On the 5th day, Rebecca sat with Ethan at the kitchen table. "I'm closing the case," she said. Ethan's breath caught. "You did not fail her," Rebecca continued. "But you will fail her if you never forgive yourself." That night, Ethan sat beside Lena as she fell asleep, the house finally still in a way that did not feel threatening. Outside, the world continued to move, but inside, something fragile and important had been protected. The danger was not fully gone yet, but it was no longer invisible. The days after Child Protection Services closed, the case did not feel victorious. They felt careful. Ethan noticed it in the way he checked the locks twice before going to bed, and again before turning off the lights. He noticed it in the way Lena paused at doorways, listening, as if expecting footsteps that never came. Safety, he was learning, did not arrive all at once. It had to be practiced. Elaine Porter's arrest brought a temporary stillness. The messages stopped. The unknown numbers fell silent. But silence, after everything that had happened, no longer felt neutral. It felt like something holding its breath. Lena's therapist suggested continuing sessions twice a week. Not because Lena was getting worse, but because she was finally beginning to speak without fear. In the quiet therapy room, Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, crayons spread around her like scattered stars. She drew the same house again, but this time it was different. The door was open, the walls were thinner. There were windows now, and light poured through them. When asked who lived inside, Lena smiled slightly. "A girl," she said, "and her dad." The therapist wrote this down, her expression soft. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward at its own pace. Court dates were set, motions were filed. Words like evidence and testimony appeared in documents Ethan tried not to read too late at night. Detective Claire Nolan checked in regularly. She did not promise outcomes. She spoke in facts, careful not to raise expectations too high. "The case is strong," she told Ethan during one call. "But trials are unpredictable. What matters is that the truth is documented now. It can't disappear." Ethan appreciated her honesty. Vanessa remained silent from custody. No statements, no apologies, no denials. Her quiet felt intentional, as if she were still trying to control the narrative by refusing to engage with it. Lena asked about her once. "Is she coming back?" she asked one evening as Ethan tucked her in. "No," he answered truthfully. "She won't be coming back." Lena nodded, absorbing the certainty. Then she asked something else. "Will I have to talk in the big room?" she asked. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Only if you're ready, and if you do, I'll be there the whole time." She considered this, then hugged Brownie closer. "Okay," she said. "I think I can do it." Ethan felt a quiet awe. Courage, he realized, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived as a small voice saying yes. The weeks passed slowly, the house filled with routines that felt new and comforting. Morning walks, shared breakfasts, evenings spent reading instead of answering emails. Ethan declined trips. He rearranged meetings. For the first time in years, his calendar felt like something he controlled, not something that controlled him. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. A formal notice confirming the trial schedule. 4 weeks. Witness lists attached. Lena's name included. Ethan sat at the table for a long time before showing it to her. Lena listened quietly as he explained what would happen. She asked questions about the room, about who would be there, about where she would sit. "I don't want to look at her," Lena said finally. "You don't have to," Ethan assured her. "You can look at me." The first day of court was quieter than Ethan had expected. No cameras, no shouting. Just wood-paneled walls and the steady murmur of people doing their jobs. Vanessa entered in a neutral-colored suit, her posture straight, her expression composed. She did not look at Ethan. She did not look at Lena. Witnesses spoke. Doctors described oxygen levels and fragile lungs, always using plain language, always explaining what the numbers meant in human terms. A child's body, a child's breath, minutes that mattered. Rosa testified. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. She spoke of what she had seen and of what she had not said soon enough. Nurse Margaret Hale described patterns, fear, the kind of silence that asked for help without words. When it was Lena's turn, the room seemed to shrink again. She walked in holding Ethan's hand, her steps small but steady. Brownie waited in the hallway. Lena sat down and looked at the microphone, then up at Ethan. He nodded. She spoke simply, about being scared, about thinking it was her fault, about learning that quiet did not keep her safe. "I know what happened to me," she said softly, "and I know I'm not lying." There was no drama in her voice, no anger, just truth. Ethan felt tears slip down his face without warning. The days that followed blurred together. Arguments, rebuttals, waiting, and then finally the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Vanessa was sentenced to 18 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 13. Ethan did not feel triumph. He felt something else instead. Relief. Outside the courthouse, Lena squinted at the sunlight, then smiled up at him. "Is it over?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "It is." That night, they returned home together, the house quieter than it had ever been. Not empty, just peaceful. The courthouse emptied slowly, as if the building itself needed time to exhale. Ethan and Lena did not rush away. They stood together on the steps for a moment, letting the late afternoon light settle on their faces. Cars passed. People talked in low voices. Life moved forward with a steadiness that felt unfamiliar after so many weeks of tension. Lena squeezed Ethan's hand. Not tightly, just enough. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "We can." The drive back was quiet. Not the kind of silence that pressed in or demanded attention, but the kind that simply existed. Lena watched the world pass by her window, her head resting lightly against the glass. Ethan glanced at her often, checking that she was still there, that this ordinary moment was real. When they reached the house, Ethan paused before unlocking the door. For a brief second, an old reflex surfaced, a memory of standing outside this same door and not knowing what waited on the other side. Then he turned the key and stepped inside. The house felt different now, not because the furniture had changed, but because the fear had. It no longer hid in corners or lingered behind closed doors. It had been named, confronted, and carried away. That night, Lena asked to sleep with her door open. "I like hearing you move around," she said. "It makes me feel like I'm not alone." Ethan agreed without hesitation. He stayed up later than usual, moving quietly through the house, washing dishes that were already clean, straightening books that did not need arranging. He was learning how to exist in the aftermath of something enormous. Over the following days, small changes took root. Lena laughed more easily. She sang while brushing her teeth. She left her drawings spread out on the table without worrying they would be torn up or criticized. One afternoon, she asked Ethan a question that stopped him mid-step. "Did I do something bad?" she asked. "No," he said immediately. "Why would you think that?" she shrugged. "Because bad things happened." Ethan knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Bad things happened because someone made bad choices," he said carefully. "Not because of you." Lena considered this, then nodded slowly, as if placing the idea somewhere new and fragile inside herself. Therapy continued, but the sessions shifted. They were no longer about surviving fear. They were about understanding it, naming it, letting it pass through without taking root. The therapist spoke gently about how the body remembered danger even when the danger was gone. About how healing did not mean forgetting, but learning that the past no longer controlled the present. Lena listened. She asked questions. She drew pictures that showed open skies and wide spaces. Ethan, too, began to change. He noticed how often he had equated providing with protecting, how he had believed that building a secure life meant building walls strong enough to keep harm out. He understood now that protection required something else entirely. Attention, presence. He rearranged his work permanently, declined opportunities that once would have felt impossible to turn down, chose routines that allowed him to be there in the quiet moments, not just the emergencies. One evening, as they baked together, Lena spilled flour across the counter and froze, her eyes darting up to his face. Ethan smiled and laughed softly. "Looks like we made a mess," he said. Lena waited, uncertain. "We can clean it up together," he added. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled back, a little shy, a little amazed. The news cycle moved on. The case faded from public attention. Vanessa's name appeared once more in a brief article about sentencing, then disappeared entirely. 18 years was a long time. 13 years before any chance of release was longer still. Ethan did not dwell on the numbers. He focused on what they meant in real terms: safety, time, space to grow. Weeks passed, then months. One afternoon, Lena came home from school with an idea. "I want to paint my wall," she announced. Ethan blinked. "Your wall?" "Yes," she said, already gathering supplies. "I want to paint a tree." They spent the afternoon covering the floor with old sheets and taping the edges carefully. Lena chose deep blues and soft golds. She painted a wide trunk, strong and steady, its branches reaching out across the wall. When she finished, she added small stars among the leaves. "That's where the good things stay," she explained. "Up high, where they can't be taken." Ethan stepped back and felt something settle into place. That night, as Lena fell asleep beneath her painted sky, Ethan sat beside her bed longer than necessary. He watched her breathe, steady and unafraid, her hand resting loosely on Brownie's worn fur. He understood then that healing was not a single moment, not even a verdict or a sentence. It was a collection of ordinary days, lived without fear, built slowly and deliberately. As he turned off the light, Lena stirred slightly. "Dad?" she murmured. "Yes?" "Thank you for coming early," she said, already half asleep. Ethan swallowed. "I will always come," he replied, and for the first time, he believed it completely. 14 months passed without anyone counting them out loud. The new house was smaller, set on a street where the trees leaned toward one another as if sharing secrets. It did not impress visitors. It did not need to. The windows let in morning light, and the backyard held enough space for Lena to run without feeling watched. On their first night there, Ethan let Lena choose where everything would go. She placed Brownie on the pillow before anything else. She lined her books along the shelf in careful order. When she finished, she stood back and nodded, as if confirming something important. "This feels right," she said. Ethan understood exactly what she meant. Life settled into rhythms that no longer felt borrowed. Mornings began without rushing. Evenings ended without dread. Ethan learned the sound of Lena's laughter when it was unguarded, the way it rose and fell naturally instead of stopping short. They planted a small garden together that spring. Lena chose flowers with bright faces and stubborn stems. She pressed seeds into the soil carefully, patting the earth afterward as if tucking it in. "Things grow better when you're gentle," she explained. Ethan smiled and let her lead. School became a place of curiosity instead of caution. Lena made friends. She raised her hand in class. She stopped asking permission to speak. One afternoon, she brought home a drawing folded carefully in her backpack. It showed a house with open windows, a tall tree beside it, and two figures standing under the branches. "That's us," she said simply. Ethan taped it to the refrigerator where it stayed. On a quiet evening near the end of summer, Ethan found himself sitting at the kitchen table long after Lena had gone to bed. He held a small velvet box in his hands, turning it over slowly. Inside was a bracelet he had chosen carefully, engraved with two words he had practiced saying aloud until they felt true. "Forever family." The next morning, he waited until Lena finished breakfast before handing it to her. She opened the box slowly, her eyes widening. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said, "and neither are you." Lena slipped the bracelet onto her wrist and stared at it for a moment, as if afraid it might disappear. Then she smiled, not the cautious smile she had once practiced. A real one. That night, Ethan sang to her the same song he had sung on the first evening she came home after the hospital. His voice was not perfect. It never had been. But it was steady, and it stayed with her until her breathing slowed and sleep took hold. As the seasons changed, the world outside continued to move on. Headlines faded, names were forgotten. What remained was quieter and far more important. Lena grew taller. Her questions grew bigger. She learned that anger could be spoken, not swallowed. That fear did not have to decide her future. Ethan learned how to listen without fixing, how to stay without hovering, how to be present not only when things broke, but when they were simply ordinary. One evening, as they sat on the back steps watching the sky darken, Lena leaned against him. "Dad?" she said. "Yes?" "Do you think families can be made?" Ethan considered this. He thought of contracts and papers, of courts and promises, of blood and history, and the way people often confused one for the other. "I think families are made every day," he said, "by who shows up, By who stays? Lena nodded, satisfied. Later that night, as the house settled into its familiar stillness, Ethan walked past Lena's room and paused. The painted tree stretched across the wall, its branches reaching outward, stars scattered among the leaves. Brownie rested on the pillow, worn and loved. Lena slept peacefully beneath it all, her hand resting lightly on the bracelet at her wrist. Ethan turned off the hallway light and stood there for a moment longer than necessary, letting the quiet surround him. He understood now that coming early had not saved his daughter by itself. Staying had. Listening had. Choosing her, again and again, had. Some families were born, others were built from moments when someone refused to walk away. As Ethan finally went to bed, the house held its breath only long enough to make room for sleep. Then it let go. Safe, loved, chosen.